If you've been wanting to read Jennifer Probst Write Naked, then today is the video for you because I put together a small little slide deck with a summary of each chapter. Now, just to be clear, I love this book. I think it's amazing and you should definitely buy it. And to get the full value, read it from cover to cover. I simply put together a quick synopsis today for people who are just wondering what's inside, and mostly for people who want to join Jessie and I tomorrow, Friday, May 24th, for the Ice Cream Social. Now, Ice Cream Socials are just an informal sort of live stream chat with Jessie and myself about things that are specific to romance writers. And of course, about ice cream. So we've decided that we are going to start a small book club. So once in a while, we'll talk about books. And the first book that we wanted to talk about was Jennifer's book. So remember, definitely buy the book. I totally think it's so worth it. And if you want today's slides, check the description below. I will share them with you because there is a lot of information on the slides as well. So it might be easier to take notes while I talk if you have the slides in front of you. Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, best-selling romance author of the Cinderella and Her Seven Guards series, and on this channel we talk all about romance writing, specifically for newbie and aspiring romance authors. So if this sounds like you or something you might be interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. I post new videos every Monday. If you've ever taken a course or webinar with me, you know that I like to talk with slides, and today is no exception. Now, if you want these slides, I want to share them with you, so check the link in the description below, and you can have a copy of these slides, print them out, and have them for reference too when we talk during our Ice Cream Social for book club, and that's tomorrow. And if you're joining us afterwards, just go ahead and stop by and drop a comment in there as well. Now, the slide decks are broken up like this. We're just going to do a quick overview on who Jennifer is in case you've never heard of her, which would be crazy because she's super popular and really one of the greatest romance authors ever. And then we'll talk about what's this book that she wrote, and also her book is broken up into two parts. So I kind of split up the slides. So we'll first go over being an author, and the second half is the craft of writing. And each chapter has its own slide deck. But again, as I mentioned, I'm just going over the highlights in each of the slides. 100% definitely buy the book. It's amazing and totally worth your time. Even if you don't write romance, I still think there's a lot of value in it no matter what genre you're in. Who is Jennifer? So Jennifer is a New York Times bestselling romance author. She's married, she has 2 kids, and she has rescue dogs. I should say dogs. I don't know if she has plural, but she definitely is a dog lover. And in fact, she puts dogs in a lot of her stories, if not all of them. And she has this really cute story. I can't remember what it's called, but it's from the voice of a dog. I totally was bawling and crying during that book. But she definitely donates a lot of her money too to help with Dog Rescue Foundation. So when she says she likes dogs, she really means it, which again just makes her an awesome person with just that alone. And she also loves ice cream, and that's perfect because she's our first speaker, our featured book for book club. And she mentioned that she likes coconut and chocolate, and I don't know if she likes those together or separately, but they both sound good. She lives in Hudson Valley, New York, and she's just overall a really awesome person. And I say that because I've seen her speak at different conferences. I have stalked her afterwards, and I'm sure I forced her to listen to my terrible story ideas and asked her for help. And she was genuinely like the nicest person ever and gave me her email even just for getting additional help later. So 100% just a wonderful person. And if you have the chance to, you should also go talk to Jennifer afterwards if you see her at a conference. Now, what is Write Naked? Write Naked is her book that is part memoir, part her personal insights and advice that she wants to give to you, and instruction at the end. And it was written in 2017, but it is all parts amazing. So definitely, like I said, a definite worth buying and keeping on your shelf. All right, let's jump into part 1, being an author. So chapter 1, and again, she did a really good job of putting quotes in here. So I did either write the quote or a part of the quote because she matched up exactly the tone that she was trying to set in that chapter, or the message she was trying to convey with an applicable quote to go with it. So In chapter 1, and again, every slide deck looks exactly the same. It starts with a quote. What is this chapter about? And kind of what I think the main takeaway is that she wanted you to take away from the chapter, or definitely the main takeaway that I took away from the chapter. And so this first chapter is really just about being alone and just getting started, right? And so you have to know that writing is a solitary activity. She reprinted an article that she liked by Michael Ventura called The Talent of the Room. And the room isn't actually a physical room. It's just a sort of metaphor for, you know, you being alone in your writing space. So it could be a car, it could be your office, it could be Starbucks, wherever. But to just go ahead and get going. And the cool thing is she also mentioned she has been wanting to write, or she has been a writer since she was age 6. She just always knew that she was going to write stories. Chapter 2, Write Naked, is really just about going for it in your first draft and not really worrying about what society expects from you. And she had a funny story where her family was pretty surprised because she wrote sex in her book, and she not only is great at writing sex, she loves putting sex scenes in her books. And her mom was kind of like, maybe you could put less sex in the book. So she definitely is a firm supporter and believer that you should just write what you want and not worry what other people think. And in fact, I put a little asterisk here, and that's because next month for our June Tea Talk, I'm talking about being judged for writing sex. So I think this fits in perfectly with what the story she was telling in this chapter. And if you're not familiar with Tea Talks, it's just informal, unscripted chat between you, me, and whoever wants to add in the comments below, just about the things that I think are the issues and challenges that are specific to being a romance writer. And for sure, being judged for writing sex is one of them. So we're going to talk about that next month. She did mention, and we'll talk about this later, that she watched Joan, who is the heroine in the movie Romancing the Stone, and she happens to be a romance writer in that movie. And at the end of the movie, she wrote the end on her last chapter, and she started crying. And Jennifer herself said when she writes the end of a book, she does that as well. Chapter 3, Writers Are Crazy. So she's just going to go ahead and embrace being crazy. And there's a weird misconception out there that, writers use drugs and alcohol and they're tortured, and that's just not true. Now, my favorite part of this book had nothing to do with actually the theme of it. I love that she said, wannabe writers are people that write in their spare time, because that is so true. Like, if you were just like, hey, if I have some spare time, I will write or work on my book, that's not a writer. Like, writers are like us. They're dedicated. They put time into it. They schedule it. They say no to dinner and movies and going out with their friends just so they can finish a book. That's what a real writer is. Chapter 4, Green with Envy. Now, she had a really great definition between the difference between envy and jealousy. And envy, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it was just like, oh, that's really awesome that you won the lottery. I really hope that I win the lottery as well. Versus jealousy is like, I can't believe you got a date with that guy. How you're not even that pretty. Like, I should have gotten that date. So that's jealousy. So either way, they're both kind of maybe not the best things to strive for. So she's saying, if you feel like you're being jealous, the way to not be jealous is to simply act as if. So fake it till you make it, and just go ahead, acknowledge that you have those feelings, but then act in direct opposition to them by contradicting how you would normally respond. So don't gossip about it, don't dwell on it, and instead practice kindness and promote and congratulate anybody else who is well ahead of you in their writing career or far more successful. Chapter 5, The Right Path. So this was fascinating. So Jennifer did a really good explanation of her writing career, and I don't think I even knew all these details of her journey, and I'd read like some articles, so this was really great. It totally cleared everything up. So she had a hard time, just like everybody else, getting her first book sale. And so finally at 28, she got her first book sale, and it was her third book, and she sold it to Lionhearted. Now, Lionhearted was a questionable publisher, and people had warned her about it, but she, just like the rest of us, just really wanted to be published. So she signed the contract, and her main takeaway was don't sign a bad contract, because it was a bad contract. And the book wasn't even published till 4 years later. So then what happened after that was she made like nothing from it, right? It was like $100 because it was online only. It wasn't in bookstores. Now, later she lost $50,000, but I'll get to that in a minute. The next book she sold was, our story was to an erotic anthology. So she made $3,000, which was super exciting. And then it sounds like she kind of went through a dry spell, and she got married. She had a couple kids. She got her master's in English. I think she intended to be a teacher, and she started a mommy blog. But then she came back to writing, and she sold The Marriage Bargain to Entangled, which was digital only at the time. And with that book, she hit the New York Times and the USA Today bestseller list. And she does say that what helped was 50 Shades was really popular right about that same time. And it was listed, her book, The Marriage Bargain, was listed as an also bought. Now, if you're not familiar with what also bought is, it just means that when you go on to Amazon and readers purchase 50 Shades, next to it, it will say, hey, did you know that people who purchased 50 Shades also bought? And then it will recommend a book. And her book, The Marriage Bargain, was recommended. And so she got an agent, and then the series for The Marriage Bargain went to auction. So if you're not familiar with that, that just means that instead of one publisher making an offer, that then it goes to auction because so many people are interested in it and they bid on it. So Simon & Schuster won that bid, and that kind of set her on the path to becoming a full-time writer. So she was just saying, you know, there's obviously ups and downs in anyone's writing career. Now, chapter 6, she talks about the transition to becoming a full-time writer after that deal went through. So she said it was really difficult, and I found this too when I transitioned from working full-time to working for myself, is all of her free time was eaten up by friends and family, because all of a sudden you don't have a typical 9-to-5 job, and people assume you have so much free time. And she was doing a ton of errands and administrative work and just silly things around the house or watching her friends' kids, because people just assumed she was sitting around doing nothing. And then after a month of that, she didn't have anything written on her book. So she definitely switched that around and had a long discussion with everybody and was able to start transitioning to really just writing during the day. So her main message was to treat it like a job and say no to a lot of things. Now, she also in this chapter talked about the new adult book she wrote, Beyond Me, that hit the New York Times bestseller, but the sequel didn't do as well as she thought it would. So just to know that the market is always changing, and there's a lot of ways to get to where you want to be. Now, she did mention that she uses Cool Gus, which is an indie publishing partner for her. So she has 8 books she's self-published, and they, because she does do traditional, they take care of a lot of the work that maybe a traditional publisher would do for you. Chapter 7, Commit to Marriage, Avoid the Affairs. Now, this has nothing to do with her personal marriage. She's talking about your work in progress, the book that you need to finish. So the affairs are all those sexy new book ideas, because what happens, and I know this does to me all the time, the going just gets tough on the book you're currently trying to write, and you have a new idea, and because nothing has been written yet, you're like, that idea is so much better. I'm totally dropping this book, and I'm going to go to that other one. So if you do that, you are only really just doing the easy parts, and you're not really learning the full spectrum of being an author. So her main point was to finish books before you move on to the next idea. Chapter 8, Trademarks of Best-Selling Authors. So this is a workshop and totally worth taking because she does embellish more, but she did explain a lot in the book that her and Laura Kay gave, or I don't know if they still do, on writing secrets. So they polled a ton of New York Times best-selling authors and USA Today bestsellers, and they asked them what their secrets are, and they shared them in a presentation. So really quickly, the major points were that readers love characters, emotion is key, make every chapter like a hook, know who your reader is that you're trying to satisfy, always do constant and consistent marketing, be nice to bloggers, those are your key influencers for getting your book out there, Figure out a way to stand out to readers. So if you are on social media, maybe you always talk about dogs because that's something that you do, or you always talk about makeup, like I always talk about ice cream and dessert, right? So figure out something unique that writers can associate with you as a personality, just like they would with a character. Your writing is the product that fuels your career. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Be professional and produce a great product first. Believe in yourself, be positive on social media. And that's, she did elaborate on that a lot. And there's another chapter later on in this book on what to do with social media. So we won't go into it here. And write the book you're passionate about. So there's a lot of pressure to write trends. And in fact, I did write a book to a trend, but Jennifer's advice is write what you're passionate about. And that's so true because the book is going to be so much better. And be prolific. So backlist is king. Try to have as many books written as you can, and be careful about genre hopping, obviously for branding purposes. Never give up, and write. Now, here we go into social media. So this is for cultivating relationships, not saying buy my book. So there's some authors that only go on there to say buy this, or go to this book signing and get my signed copy of this. So you should try to go onto social media for trying to create a relationship and engage people, not just for a buy me sort of post. She did suggest if you're going to do posts, you could do something with humor, positivity, kindness, sharing of interesting information. And she does suggest doing it at least once a day. She has admins that do promotions for her. She invites other authors to do takeovers. And she did mention she does one giveaway a week. So basically, she had this story where she said she was at an auction in New York with a bunch of publishers, and people were saying they loved her social media because they had looked at it beforehand and loved how she had engaged with readers and fans, and applauded her for that. And then there was another author next to her, and the author said, I don't have time for social media because I need to write books. And she did say that that author did not get a deal. Chapter 10, networking. So now she talked about both the left and the right side. So if you are trying to connect with a bigger author, to be nice, or to ask, that was her point, was, you never know. Obviously be nice, but you never know who might say yes, but it's always a no if you don't even try. And on the other end, if you're a big author and someone is asking for you to look at their work or something else like that, to be kind and polite when you respond to them. She did suggest collaborating with other authors to help reach more readers. She started, or I'm not sure, she joined the start of the Dirty Dozen Book Club, which is a Facebook group, and they give out a free book every month to their readers. And she did say, if you're going to do those collabs, make sure you find similar authors. So obviously we talked about this in the Amazon Also Bots. You can look at that section, but stay within the same genre. So if you are selling sci-fi romance, then you probably want to partner and collab with those writers versus, say, a Christian romance writer that might not be the best fit. And chapter 11, a street team. Her street team is called the Probst Posse, and it's a Facebook group, and it's run by Jennifer's admin, and it started out as just 10 people, and now it's over 1,000. She does giveaways, swags, new releases, cover reveals, and she says it's a great place for readers to get together, but they also, even though they like prizes, they do like having quality time with her as well. Chapter 12 is her talking about the whole indie revolution that kind of happened during her career, and how she talked about it in a positive way, how it's really helped because the gatekeepers that are the traditional publishers have now, they're gone. So in the past, if you wanted to do a lot of erotica, BDSM, or new adult, you couldn't if they said no, and now you don't have to. You can just go ahead and publish it. It also helped ebook prices to come down. But if you are going to do indie publishing, she wanted to make sure you understood the difference between content editing versus copy editing, and that you should strive to be someone who is known for having high quality products, which means having a professional cover designer, having both types of edits. And she also mentioned, a lot of people buy back their rights to books that have been traditionally published, and you never know when a backlisted item could go ahead and spike. She mentioned that some of her backlisted items spiked when she got a book bub. So keep those as revenue lines. Chapter 13, your big payday. So I don't know if you guys knew this. She got $1 million for the marriage bargain auction. And that's really obviously what set her on the road to becoming a full-time author. She was able to quit her job. But she confirmed that even if she didn't have the money, she would still be writing. And she did put a nice note saying she hopes that you get $1 million too. But just make sure that you have the stamina to keep going. And that's kind of it for part 1. So now we're going to jump into part 2, the craft of writing. And chapter 14 is basically saying that she stares at a blank page a lot. It can be kind of boring, but she does try to practice it every day, just like a muscle. And it's actually harder for her not to write than it is for her to try to force herself to write. And she works out every day. So go Jennifer. So she did say, make sure you're always moving, or she tries to get up while she is writing to kind of get the blood flowing and move around. She did say you're going to bounce back faster from rejections if you do writing on a daily basis versus maybe just only writing one book and then doing nothing. And then that's the only book maybe that you have. And then you're really bummed if it gets a rejection versus just, write a book and then write the next book and then the next book, etc. Inspiration. So writing everyone always asks writers, where do you get your ideas? And so she has just told you, which is pretty much all of the usual suspects: books, movies and TVs, real life. She mentioned being at restaurants where her husband was like, let's go. But she was like, no, I need to stay so I can hear the conversation at the other table and figure out, what the end result or resolution is going to be. Quotes, people that she knows, surfing the net, and music. So if something inspires you, just do more of that. And chapter 16, the right to suck. She actually has a Post-it next to her. I don't know if it was next to her desk or in her writing space, but it just says that she has permission to suck. So, perfectionism and, worrying about failing is really what causes writer's block and, makes you freeze up and limits your creativity. So if you just give her permission to kind of suck, she thinks you're actually going to become a better writer because, like we said, writing takes practice. And she said the next day when she reads her stuff, she's actually pleasantly surprised at what she wrote. Chapter 17, the sewage and the blockage. So now she's talking about writer's block and how she had it for 8 months while she was trying to write a novella. And she does attribute it to the fact that she didn't have a deadline, she didn't have an agent, she didn't have a publisher waiting on it. So she went ahead and inspired herself and went to a writing conference. And when she came back, she came home and finished that book. So her point was, though, no amount of studying or networking can really prepare you for all the time that you need to spend alone. So she did go through some really great examples of things that block creativity and solutions. So if you have negative thoughts, she said to just get out a piece of paper and write them longhand with a pen. And if you have outside influences who aren't so nice, like she had a teacher who told her she wasn't a good writer and she should consider another career, which I think that's terrible. Teachers should never say that to children. But so she decided about quitting. When you're a kid, that's pretty devastating, or honestly, even as an adult, that's probably devastating. But she said to be like Rocky Balboa, and she put the quote in there, it's not how hard you're hit or how hard you can hit, it's how hard you get hit and you just get up and keep moving forward. If you have expectations, that's going to also be a block. So just write without any. And obviously life events. So she talked about when her dad was getting surgery and that was a really stressful time for her. And then it's okay sometimes just to write for yourself. You don't always have to write for the reader, and just your writing can kind of help heal you on the inside. If you feel burnt out, she has a 3-step process: turn off social media, the internet, do something fun, and then redo your calendar if you have too many deadlines or too much stuff going on to free up some time. And she did put a link in here to a New Yorker article on writer's block, and it had some of the top causes, which obviously perfectionism is, I think, the top one. Chapter 18, the right hook and warm-up jab. So your book is kind of like a boxing match, and the jabs are parts in the story that warm up the reader for the hook, and the jabs keep the story moving forward, and the hooks really satisfy the reader. And the final knockout is when the villain is lying on the ground and has been defeated. So keep thinking about that throughout your whole book. Chapter 19 on building characters. So Jennifer said she always starts with her characters. So if your book seems like it's falling flat, it's probably because you didn't do enough character development. And when people say show, don't tell, they really mean make it active, not passive, whatever you're trying to convey. She had a really great example that I put in here. And that's if you want your main character or any character to be perceived as a workaholic, instead of someone calling him that or him saying that to himself, instead you should just show him at the police station working like till 2 a.m. drinking stale coffee, and then him wondering why he doesn't have a life, so he doesn't really know it. Chapter 20, secondary characters that pop. And this is what she mentioned as the key to doing a series spinoff, and that's because you just never know what series could be spotlighted, and then people might want more of a spin-off from it because the other characters were so interesting. And the way to make them interesting is to give them a secret, a big personality, you know, make them unforgettable, but not too much that they overshadow the star of that current book. Chapter 21, let's talk about sex. So she did say it doesn't matter if you're writing sweet or you have a really steamy erotica, that both of them need both mental and physical descriptions to build up some of that sexual tension. And she had some really good examples inside of here from books that she had read and liked, as well as her own. Now, she did say make sure that your cover, your title, your blurb, and the category all match what your reader's expecting. So you're making a promise to the reader with all of those things so that they know when they open your book, it will have a certain heat level. Because most books, even though we understand what heat levels are, your book doesn't come with a heat level warning like PG or PG-13 or rated R or rated X. Readers just ascertain that from all of those other items around your book. So make sure they match both if you're doing sweet versus if you're doing something steamy. Now, if you're not familiar with heat levels, I do have a video up on my channel walking you through basically what a 1 is, and that's simply a kiss, all the way to a 5, which is explicit, everything goes and gets detailed. Chapter 22, theme. So this really pulls your story together, and this was a huge like light bulb moment for me, because she wasn't saying, you know, everyone tells you you need a theme for your story, and that's great. But what she was saying, you personally, the author, have a story theme that you as a writer put in every single one of your books. Like it's kind of your theme of that you're always trying to convey personally. And so hers is, I am too broken to deserve love. That's what the theme that she keeps putting into her books. So, you know, if you can look back at your books and understand what that is, as well as just, you know, that commercial book theme that you're trying to put in there, whether it's forgiveness or redemption or something like that, that's definitely going to elevate your writing. Chapter 23, the sagging middle. Oh my gosh, I did not know that Jennifer was a pantser, but this totally makes sense. Like as you're reading this book, you'll so get it, because she's always like, trust the process, you know, believe in your muse. And that's 100% kind of how I think a pantser would think. I am definitely a strong plotter. So for me, it was really good to hear this, because when you go to write, even the best outline, sometimes you get stuck. And I could write a mechanical, you know, story or chapter based on my outline, but I really need that to trust myself and use that muse and everything else in order to create a really great chapter. So I think, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a pantser or a plotter. I think you can get a lot out of what Jennifer's saying. So she's saying that, you know, just trust yourself and things will just happen. Just keep going. Chapter 24, emotion. So again, if your book falls flat like before, it could be because of character or it could be due to lack of emotion. So in order to get better at showing emotions and telling them to the reader in your scenes, go back to a lot of the books that you felt a strong emotion to and analyze it and dissect it and figure out what the author did to evoke that particular emotion into you, so that you can basically analyze it from that point and then be able to reconstruct it in your own books. Chapter 25 is you don't have to love all of your children equally. And so each of your books, you know, she said sometimes authors will say they love all their books equally. And she said that's not necessarily true, because some books have different personal attributes to them with you as an author. So like the first book that ever hit the New York Times bestseller list, that's probably going to be one of your favorite books, right? And so what she's saying is each book carries its own memory, especially of how hard it was to write or how easy it was to write. And so you don't have to love every book. It's okay that you can just trust the process and your skill set and write a really great book that of a concept that you love, but you didn't necessarily fall in love with that book. Chapter 26, the hard stuff. So she talks about writer's guilt, and whenever you're not writing, you feel bad. And she mentioned that she kind of feels like a loser if her word count wasn't high enough. And I totally get, like, I feel like that all the time too. But just know that it's a lot of alone time. So you feel guilty too then when you're alone because you're not with anybody or spending time with your family. So just guilt all around, whether you're writing or you're not writing. But she did say, and this was so funny, it's so true, that writers get so excited to go to these writing conferences and be around other writers. And then towards the end, you can see everyone is like, oh my God, I just want to be by myself, right? Because we're all like introverts usually, and we feel more together and whole when we're just by ourselves. So I thought that was funny. But anyways, she said, she also mentioned that deadlines help too. All right, this is it. Last chapter, perfect endings. So Jennifer was working on book number 30 at the time that she went to print with this book, I believe. And like I mentioned at the beginning, she said crying at the end of her books helps her to know it was a good book. Now, how do you know when to end your book? She basically said it's when your heroine has changed and grown, and so that they are very different from the person that they were on page 1 to the very last page. But if you still can't figure it out, a cold read could help, which means you kind of forgot about your book and left it in the shelf, and then you came back to read it later on. And really when all the different puzzle pieces from your book fit together, that's when the end is. But again, great advice because she's a pantser. She said just trust in your gift so that you'll know when the end of the book is. All right, so did you guys find this useful? I know this was long. I'm looking at the time. It's over 30 minutes. So let me know if this was helpful or this was like way too much. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this, give it a thumbs up so that I know. And then tell me if you want more. I have so many craft books you don't even know. I could definitely break these all down, but not if they're not useful. Don't forget Ice Cream Social on Friday, May 24th. And again, if you're watching this afterwards, don't worry, Jessie and I have many more ice cream socials planned for the future. So just make sure to subscribe and you'll get those notifications. All right, I hope everyone's having a fabulous day, and I will see you guys, well, I'll see you tomorrow if you're watching this on Thursday. Otherwise, I'll just see you guys next week. And remember, I have a free course called Plot Your First Romance. It's a free 5-day course. Bare bones, just gets you up and running and heading into your outlining session for your romance book idea. So if you are interested, make sure to sign up below. That is free, and I will leave the link in the description.